Alrighty, so here we are at week 8, Learn Together. And in some ways, students come into JavaScript wanting what we're doing in this week to be where they start. But I hope you see the benefit of actually building the base language, understanding it. And now we actually are going to gather and process the user input. Okay, so take your week 7 code, copy it into create a new folder, week 8, have your index and your JS file. And implement user input. This is what we learned in this section that we just covered, right? But the key is you have to implement it for your decision requirements, right? What kinds of information do you need to do that? Now, here's what I want to see. Now, I'm going to kind of specify, I want to see at least a couple. I'd like to see more. You'll see mine that it's going to have more, but the more you can handle creating these elements and then acting by hitting the form and then submitting that data, it's just a better experience for you to move into thinking about your dev 1. But at minimum, inputs, right? This is the basic thing we've seen, input fields, right? And we've also seen drop downs and checkboxes. I ended up using all these in various combinations. Okay, so, but again, challenge yourself to look at your own decision code. What were the inputs that were required? You may have had even more than I did, so you might have to scale those down. I'm just saying, here's where, each of us selected a different input for our decision making. So now, once you have that working, you need to code a render function. We saw Andrews, and it's fine to base, as far as the way you saw him organize it, but it is the way you saw him organize it. But the way you will write it can be based on maybe his organization, but your own variable names and your own way of handling your process. Okay. But you need a render function. So where last week I let you kind of figure out how you wanted to have the DOM elements. Now you actually need to have a render function, okay, that handles that. Okay, so it renders into the DOM and some kind of meaningful output, right? If you were showing global variables, take them out. I didn't mind. You'll see what it looks like. Keep the data entered in an array of object data format. Okay, so this is what we saw in the course, and I want you to stay with this. And if you weren't doing it before, do it now, because this is the way we're going to see from pretty much this whole section that we're going to do, meaning until our dev 1, is he's going to have the to-do and the notes be in an array of objects. And as I've said before, it is the most common format data structure for JavaScript. And then, I'm not going to, it doesn't have to be elaborate. If you have any kind of CSS, I'll show you mine, what I did, but it's not anything complicated. You're just going to want to have some experience. I throw it in now because it's part of also the dev 1 requirement. It says doing some simple styling. Okay, so this is no different, except I did add one thing. For those of you that are submitting early, and maybe you're doing it just because you don't want to get done, but maybe you're doing it so you don't have to do the replies, which, I think the replies are good, mostly because your replies need to talk about the student's code, right? And then if you do this and you're submitting early, your work has to be gradable. Meaning, if I have a question for you, if I looked at your code, which I generally, like I did today, I saw a couple of folks post and I had a question on one of them. And, until that question is not outstanding, right? They're not in that 2-day early window. So I know it might be a little detail that you may have, I'm not sure which of you have been trying to do this, but I just think it's a good idea for you to write something. Look at somebody's code, because the more you read code, the better you'll get at writing it. Okay, so let me switch over to mine. So what I did here on mine is, I had some CSS styling just for centering things using Google Fonts, which I absolutely love, and they're so easy to use. I gave myself a heading. I have an input. And I definitely recommend you use a form here. Yes, you can use this individual inputs, but I think a form is better, and I'll show you why in a minute. As a matter of fact, you're going to hear me start talking about this more next week, is doing validation. Anytime you get user input, you need to validate it. So for me, I have an input field. You can see I have a drop down. I have another drop down. So this is, the username. Now this was kind of like, I thought later I could toss it out, but I left it. Am I driving, right? Was there an unplanned event in a day of the week? So, right, once I put this in here, then I say, it's 7 o'clock, class is at 8. I am driving, right? What can I do this morning, right? So here are the, again, Monday, right? This is the things you can do. Give me that nice little encouragement message. And notice the other thing that happens is my form resets. So if I do it again, which again, this one actually is not printing, but I want to do that later. Let's say it's 6 a.m. It's 8 o'clock. I'm not driving. It is Tuesday. Now, watch what's going to happen here is that when I hit submit, this will render in addition to my next entry, right? So this is the idea of when you write these render functions. Again, we've seen there's nothing really new here, except that we're just approaching it from your own decision code. And I said last week, and if you want to do this, if you want to do a new decision code, you just need to meet the requirements we have coded thus far. So there we go. Now, the thing about this data, and you're going to see this in the coming weeks, is this is not persistent data. Now, what do I mean by that? If I hit refresh, it's just in the local memory. It's not anywhere else. But we're going to learn how to use local storage for persistent data, meaning it will save it even as our pages are closed. So the last thing I want to show you here is I'm going to go to my in index.html, and you can see I ended up using labels because I thought they were good. I use my values for my drop down, but one of the really important things, and you're going to hear me harp on this, is using if you check this out. One of the things, I could just hit submit here, right? And it's going to take these as a default. But typically, have you ever noticed, and I suspect you have, when you're on a form, it won't let you do that. And one simple, easy, minimal way to do validation is just to add in whatever element you have the required tag. Now, Andrew doesn't talk about this yet. I don't even know if he talks about it way beyond the course of which we're going to complete. But I want you to know about it because it's really important to do validation. So let me show you what happens just by doing simple validation. Now, when I hit submit, that form will not submit. This stops that from happening. Nothing is being submitted, which you want. Now, I'm going to show you next week how to do actually more involved, meaning give the user a message that says, hey, this is required, right? Because this is the one required field I've made for my form. And again, play around with this for yours, but you don't want the user to just hit submit and not enter any data, okay? All right, so I hope this helps you. I know, again, my form, my inputs were several. I at least, again, minimum one input, and if you have two inputs, then you need to use one of the drop downs or one of the check boxes. You can see I use 3 drop downs for the days, for the gym times, for the current times, and then I just pulled those values out of that form, and that's part of what you get to do this week. All right, have fun with this. It really is why most people come to this class. So I know week 8 may seem late, but it is a perfect time to learn how to do forms. See you later.